In today's business world, a lot of employers believe that they have to like candidates before they hire them. And this whole concept of liking a candidate before you hire them is completely dysfunctional. Why is it dysfunctional? Because when a person starts to say that they like a certain candidate, they are bringing their emotions into the business and they're not thinking about doing what is in the best interest of the business, but what is in the best interest of themselves. When it comes down to things like hiring, you cannot invest your emotions in any way, shape, or form into it. As a business person, you have to think about the whole idea of hiring from an objective perspective. When it comes down to hiring, you have to think about who is going to be the best person for the job because when it comes down to hiring, you are investing money and resources into a person in the hopes of gaining productivity from their labor. And this is something that a lot of employers really don't think about when it comes down to hiring because they're thinking about, I want to hire somebody that I like. And one of the big problems with hiring people you like in a lot of cases is one, they're not very productive, and two, you have a hard time supervising them because you have these personal ideas about this person. And that is the main reason why you shouldn't hire people that you like because when you want to hire people, you want to hire people who you can establish one, a line of authority with, and two, establish standards with. Those are the two important things you want to have in a business when you hire people. You want to have that line of authority so that they know that you are the leader and that everyone has to follow your lead, and you want to have people who you can establish standards with. That's very hard to do with people that you like or you have some sort of emotional bias towards. When you have an emotional bias towards someone, it's very hard to supervise them, very hard to hold them accountable for their work or insist that they meet standards such as your deadlines or quality issues. This is why when you're in the workplace, you see people, really making a lot of mistakes and getting a pass for it because a lot of times in management starts to become biased towards this individual and they start thinking that because they like this guy, they cannot hold this person accountable for their behaviors or the quality of their work. Meanwhile, the person who you don't like, guess what you're going to do? You're going to hold that person to a standard and you're going to be a more authoritative figure around them. And this is why it's best to just hire the people you don't like because as I see it, if I'm going to hire qualified people, you're going to have a more productive environment when everybody knows what their standards are, what is required of them, and that in the workplace you're expected to bring in work. But when you have people hiring people that they like, what happens is the workplace goes from being about labor and productivity oriented to a social environment. And when you have a social environment, oftentimes work doesn't get done to a standard, and that causes productivity to go down. And it also, if you're in retail or customer service, it often turns customers away from the product and the business. And this is something that a lot of people really don't look at because they are so emotionally invested in what this person's charms are or their personality or their presence. They're not thinking about what the person brings to the business. And you really have to think about that from a professional standpoint. A lot of people don't. They don't really think about the whole of the business. They don't think about what this person will represent to the business long term. When you're in a business situation, you really have to think about again when you invest in this person, you're investing money and time, and most importantly, time. And if this person you're too emotionally invested in this person, then you're not going to be able to get them to be as productive as they could be, and they're not going to be an asset to your business. And this is something that many people, they take for granted. They think, oh, it looks like the guy's a nice guy, or she looks like a nice girl, or I feel comfortable around them. Not understanding that comfortable people are the worst type of people you could hire for a business. When you have a business, you really don't want to be comfortable because when you're comfortable, you start to get lazy and you start to get slack and you start to let your standards go down. And then your employees, because they see you getting comfortable with them and start getting social with them, what happens is they start feeling that they don't have to work as hard in the workplace. They feel that they can, let something go by or let a standard, drop a bit. And that before long, the quality of your products are going down, the quality of your services are going down, and you're losing customers. Why? Because you're um, hiring people that you want to be comfortable with. Again, your business is not your home. Your business is a separate entity, and people don't treat their businesses like separate entities. And what happens is their business starts to decline because they start hiring the wrong people. And I can give you an example of this, which, like your DC Comics, which almost 13, 14 years ago hired Dan Dido as their editor in chief. Now, I'm sure that some people like this guy in management and upper management, but the guy had no publishing experience and he has no management experience. And because he has none of these things, what's happening is that the DC Comics brand started to decline and the quality of the products got really bad. And now the product is at a point where they're starting to lose market share. And that's all because someone hired a guy based on emotion rather than looking at, the professional background. You really, in a business, have to look at people's professional backgrounds and you have to think objectively. You cannot bring your emotions when it comes down to hiring people. Again, you're spending money and time on this person, and every decision that you make, will have an impact on your business because when you say you're going to make the person that you like an employee, what happens is, again, um, you start putting their needs first and you don't put the business's needs first. When you hire someone objectively, because you're the authority figure and you have standards, that person's perception is going to be about putting the business first. And you really, when you own a business, you really want to hire people who are interested in putting your business first and when you're working for you and focused on building your business, helping you build your business. Now, what they do off the clock that has nothing to do with you, but when they are on your clock and are under your authority, you want them to be focused on your business and making your business a priority. This is the big problem, with employers today. They invest all of their emotion into employees, and then when things start getting rough, they start having problems. They become even more emotional. They become more frustrated, and the reason why they're having problems is, again, the reasons why they hire these people. They're hiring people that they like. They're looking to have friends. They're looking to have a social environment. But a business is not a social environment. A business is an entity designed to sell goods and services in exchange for money. And that's all a business is. If you're not in a business to make money, you're not going to have a business for long. Now, yeah, you're going to have a professionalism. You're going to have courtesy, and in many cases you're going to have close personal connections. But when you have in a business environment, everything has to remain professional. Everything has to be up to a certain standard. That's how you build the word of mouth. That's how you get more customers. And your employees need to understand that you need customers in order to make money. And part of making a customer comfortable is being professional. What the customer really wants to see is that employee who knows about the products and is comfortable with the products and understands the products and can help them with the products. That's what they want. They don't want a friend. Friends, they got plenty of. On the workplace, they want someone who can answer questions and solve problems. That's what they pay for. That's what business owners are supposed to be paying for. You're paying for people who can get the work done and solve problems. That's all you do on a job is work towards solving problems, and satisfying customers. That's all that. That's all that's there is to it. And everybody needs to be on the same page regarding professionalism and courtesy, and that the business comes first, the customers come first, and that you know there are no friends in the business. When we go to work the business, there are no friends. And this type of work environment tends to work a lot better when there are no friends in the business. What happens is in a business where everybody does not really like each other too much, and does not have too much of an emotional attachment to people, is that people tend to be more focused on meeting the goals of the organization. They become, focused on what needs to be done. And when you have a workplace where everybody's a friend, again, nobody focuses on the customer. Nobody focuses on meeting the goals of the organization. Everything it becomes a big party. And what happens is in these environments is that one person will be focused on the business. Else will be pretty much hanging out, and you have one person trying to carry the entire load, and everybody else is not taking work seriously. And because that happens, the business suffers, and the quality declines. And this is something that many employers just don't look at because, again, they're putting halos around the people that they like, that they can't see that they're impeding the productivity of their business. And this is why you hire people that you don't like and you not comfortable with, because these are the kind of people who are going to help your organization grow. When you have people that you don't like working for you, they understand that in order to get out of discomfort, they have to, do things in order to move themselves forward. They have to learn new skills, learn new techniques, and they have to create new solutions. This is what happens when you have people working for you who you're not too comfortable with, and you have some sort of professional distance with. When you have that professional distance, everybody is connected towards improving the business and not towards having relationships with each other or being friends with each other and thinking more about after hours. They're thinking more about what's going to go on during the business hours. And that's why you hire people that you don't like. And it used to be an old notion that you may not like this person, but you have to work with this person. And that helped people get through a day in the workplace. And that helped a lot of businesses be a lot more productive. But things have changed over the last couple of years. And we've gotten this whole culture of people liking each other, people feeling comfortable with each other, the whole dysfunctional notion of a business being a family. And that's not what a business is. A business, again, is a place where people go to exchange goods and services for money and to make money. The whole goal of a business is to make money for the business owner so that they can pay their employees, and then two, take care of themselves. But we've gotten, far off of this track. A lot of HR people are so focused on meeting the emotional needs of employees that they aren't thinking about what is in the best interests of a business. And when you're in business, when you're making that investment in people, you're making an investment in a person who can produce. And you want the person who's going to be productive and help you meet the goals of your organization. And that requires someone to really remain objective and really have a good sense of balance, a good assessment of people. And I'm not seeing that. Whenever I hear people talking about how they want a business to be like a family, I know that something is wrong, and I know that people, they aren't on the same page, and they aren't really communicating with each other effectively. Now, what I mean by people being on the same page, it doesn't mean everybody thinks the same. It means that everybody knows their role on the team, everybody knows what their part is on the team, and everybody is understands how everybody else's role interconnects to lead to the organization achieving its goals and providing goods and services to people. Everybody has to understand how their part leads to everybody else doing their part, and how if one person is not functioning, how it is like a domino effect and affects the entire organization. And this is something that everybody has to look at a lot more objectively, because when you're hiring people, you want to have, again, people who you aren't really comfortable with for the main reason, because you want someone who you can supervise, and someone who you can teach, and someone who you can um, establish a standard and let know what your standards are and how you want those standards maintained. That's what you want in an employee. You want somebody you can supervise. When you have a friend, again, you cannot supervise a friend. You cannot supervise someone you like because you now have biases towards this person. You feel comfortable about this person. You're afraid of hurting their feelings. You're afraid of giving them constructive criticism, and you're afraid of expressing, your professional assessment of their skills. That's what happens when you have someone who you are comfortable with and you are friends with. You cannot objectively and effectively supervise them, and you cannot effectively um, lead them. And what happens is these people lose respect for you and as a leader, and then you really your workplace environment really starts to deteriorate. This is what leads, to a lot of the worker morale going down and workers not being as effective as they could be, because it all starts with people investing their emotions into one or two employees at the expense of the employees that work at an organization objectively. And you really have to think about how you're hiring people and what you're hiring them for, because whenever I would think of hiring someone, I always look at what they have done, like in the case of the artist I hired, Bill Walko, for the book for this ISIS book cover, and I hired him for two projects. Last year, I hired him. The first project I hired him for was this cover, and he did a great job. He did it within about a month, and because he did it within a month and was extremely professional, I went back to him to do this cover, and I hired him based on what I saw on his DeviantArt page. I saw that he had a fast productivity time and he had good communication. And when you're hiring people, again, you have to think on that type of level. You have to think objectively about what they do, how they produce, and how fast they can produce, and how good their communication is. Those are the things that you use to assess somebody's skills. You never use your emotion and say, I like someone. When I looked at his art, I said he would be a good fit for my characters. I said he would be a good design. I looked at the style and I said it would be a good fit. You have to really think regarding things about how it's going to be a good fit, how the style is going to fit, and what type of audience you have. And I had to think about those things regarding it. And I tried to keep my emotions, out of it. And you have to remain and you have to remain very objective. And I tried to remain as objective as possible. And this is something that many managers really have to think about when they're out here and they're thinking about spending money on new employees. When you think about hiring a new employee, you have to think about how they will, contribute to the business and how they will be an asset to the business. And you can't really do that with an employee you're happy and comfortable with and someone that you like and have all these preferential preferences for. Um, you have to understand that, there are no friends in business. And when business starts to get personal, your business is going to be in trouble. So whenever you go out and hire someone, always try to remain, again, objective and take a long, hard look at the person from a panoramic view and not a personal view. Because in your environment, you don't need people to be personal, you need them to be professional.